In our final module, we're going to explore the use of cluster analysis and segmentation in exploring data. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about the theory of clustering. So we will now discuss what is clustering, why do I want to do it, and how do I cluster? So first of all, what is clustering? Clustering is the act of placing items into groups so that everything in the group is going to be similar or the same. So everybody in the group is the same, and it's going to be different from things not in the group. So what type of clustering is there? So let's talk about what the types of the clustering, and then we'll explore how to do it. Okay, we could do simple clustering, and we can do complex clustering. Okay, that sounds relatively vague, so let's go into a little bit more detail. Simple clusters, what is that? That's going to be a rule-based cluster. It's going to be based upon some kind of a discrete or observable feature, usually one, maybe two features. It's typically referred to as segmentation. So if it's really simple, we call it segmentation. Complex clusters is when we start using mathematical techniques, and it's going to be based on usually continuous variables. And there's going to be, as opposed to simple clusters where it's going to be something like male and female, married and single, this is going to have multiple variables. This is typically what we call clustering. We're going to explore both of these in this unit. So let's first talk about simple clusters. And the best way to explore that is going to be with an example. So here we have a bunch of animals. Now we're going to cluster these animals and based upon some observable feature. Now this is going to be segmentation clustering because it's going to be something we can observe. Now we can break these animals down in lots of different ways. For example, we might break them down by size. We could say, well, there's some of these animals are very little, some are medium, and some are very large. We might do it that way. We could say, maybe we could break this down by what they eat. Some of these animals eat meat, and some of these animals eat plants. Maybe we could segment that way. That's perfectly fine. What else could we do? We might want to break them down by what their skin looks like. We could say, well, some of these animals have fur on their skin, and some of them don't have fur. Now, you might notice something, that the furry animals are mammals. These are animals that are typically classified as mammals, and these animals that don't have fur are typically classified as reptiles. However, you're going to notice something. There's a whale over there. That was incorrectly clustered. So in other words, if I were to segment based upon fur, actually killer whales do have fur. It's just hard to see it. So you might accidentally incorrectly cluster this thing. Now, the thing that you need to know about clustering and segmentation is it's not perfect. Okay, clusters are mostly correct. They don't necessarily have to be perfect. So why do I want to cluster? Well, we might cluster for learning purposes. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I can do is I can learn something that is not usually or easily observed by breaking the animals into something that is observable. So we're going to look at that in just a minute. So I can learn something new. What else? Treatment. Once I have things segmented or clustered, I can now realize that these members of this group have similar characteristics. So now I can treat them all in a similar manner. Also, clustering can be useful. I might be able to use this in an analytic for analytic purposes. So there's lots of things I can learn stuff. I can learn how to treat my clusters, and it can also be useful. So let's start off by learning. Let's go into that a little bit more. Let's go back to this example where we had the animals broken down by the fact that they were furry or not furry. Now, you might remember from grade school where you learned about mammals and reptiles. They have certain features. Okay, let's look at these furry animals first. So it's observable that these animals have fur on their skin. Okay, but now they have things that are not observable. For example, they're warm-blooded, means that these animals, if it gets cold out, these animals are fine. They are warm-blooded and they can handle cold weather. You cannot look at a lion and say, hey, this lion has warm blood. You can't look at its blood, but you can look at its skin and realize it's got fur. And once you know that, you now know that he is warm-blooded. Also, their babies will drink milk. Every one of these animals here will have their babies will drink milk. Also, mammals do not lay eggs. Okay, they give birth to live young. Okay, but let's look. Wait a minute. You're going to say, hey, that's a platypus, and a platypus does lay eggs. Okay, that's fine. As I said before, the clusters are not perfect. They are mostly correct. So just because you will find incorrect information in a cluster, most of the furry animals do not lay eggs. What about these guys over here, the non-furry animals? Well, I can observe their skin and I can say, well, they don't have fur. So now I can also learn stuff that is not observable. For example, they are cold-blooded. So if it gets really cold out, these animals will not survive. Their babies do not drink milk, and they don't lay eggs. But wait, remember the killer whale? The whale is a mammal. So not only was this killer whale in the wrong cluster, he was incorrectly classified, so none of these things apply. So it's not perfect. Also, the snake. Not all snakes lay eggs. Some snakes give birth to live young. So again, this is not perfect. It's just mostly correct. Now, why do we care about that? What if I owned a zoo and two new animals came in, a tiger and a Komodo dragon? And let's say I don't know anything about these animals. Okay, I don't know anything about tigers and I don't know anything about Komodo dragons. The question I would have is, which one of these animals is warm-blooded and which one is cold-blooded? Which one feeds their babies milk and which one lays eggs? Well, we notice that the tiger has furry skin. So we would put him in the furry cluster or the furry segment. And because this tiger is furry, we know that it is warm-blooded, its babies will drink milk, and it does not lay eggs. We don't know anything about the tiger, but we can observe a characteristic and learn something new. What about the Komodo dragon? Again, the Komodo dragon doesn't have fur, so he goes over here into the not furry segment. And we know that the Komodo dragon is cold-blooded. His babies do not drink milk, and the Komodo dragons will lay eggs. So this is what we're learning something new, and we can even make predictions as a result. So again, we are learning that we can group animals based upon whether or not they have furry skin, which is observable, and we're learning new things which is not observable, that they're warm-blooded or cold-blooded, their babies drink milk, or they lay eggs. So that's why clustering, you can learn something new. And again, it's not perfect. Remember our whale, our platypus, and our snake. It's not perfect. You cannot let perfect be the enemy of good when it comes to clustering. So these things are going to be mostly correct. So let's translate this into customers. Observable, we can look at their age, their gender, their marital status, whether or not they have children. I can look at other observable things, their employment, their education, their income, whether or not they own a house or rent it. I can look at their driver record, their deposit balance, their purchase history. So I can observe some things and I can learn non-observable things. For example, based upon something up here, I might be able to know which customers are going to be more profitable or have a higher lifetime value. For example, if I were a grocery store, if I know your gender, male or female, I know that female customers tend to be more profitable than male customers because women tend to do more purchasing in a grocery store. I could also learn other things like probability of retention or attrition. For example, which customer is going to stay or which customer is going to go. For example, if I had auto insurance and I was a discount auto insurance customer company, then I might say, well, the young people will probably want discount auto insurance, and as they get older, they will go for a more full service insurance person who they'll have life insurance and homeowners insurance, et cetera, because it's more profitable or more cost effective and easier. So I can learn something. I go, you are young, so you are not going to stay very long. I could also look for reasons for staying or leaving. I can say things like, the customer may decide again that if a customer is young and has a bad driving record, they're going to stay with a discount auto insurance company. But as they get older and their driving record is going to get better, they're going to leave. I know that if I'm a discount auto insurance guy, I know that. So I know that I'm not going to be able to keep this person. So this is something I can understand if they're going to leave, and I can understand why they're going to leave. So I don't have to sit there and as soon as you say, gee, I got a better driving record and I'm older, so I'm going to get a better insurance rate at a different carrier, I don't have to worry about that. I know that I can't keep that person. I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to keep focusing on young people who crash their cars. That's, it allows me to strategize. Also, I can look at things like risk, filing a claim, loan default, fraud. For example, a person who has a low deposit balance, this person is probably going to be more likely to default on a loan. I could look at other things like, for example, owning or renting. Believe it or not, a person who owns or rents, if a person owns a house, they tend to have a better driving record. Why? Who knows? Maybe they're just more responsible. Renters tend to file claims more often. People who rent apartments are more likely to commit fraud. Why? Because you don't want a permanent address if you're committing fraud. I can look at one thing and I can begin to say, well, this person rents, I have to keep my eye on that person. Not all renters are going to commit fraud, but you're more likely to commit fraud when you rent because you don't want a permanent address if you're a criminal. So, okay, what about treatment? Okay, items in a cluster will share certain characteristics, so I know how to treat them. Okay, let's go back to our friend the mammals. Okay, these are the furry guys. Okay, once I know that you are a furry animal, I know that you are not overly sensitive to cold. So if I have a zebra or a lion and I'm in, let's say, Ohio and I have a zoo, I don't have to bring a lion in during the winter, believe it or not. Maybe if it gets really cold, maybe you bring the lion in, but the lion can handle cold weather. Animals with warm blood need a lot more food. You need energy to keep your blood warm. So I'm going to have to feed the lion and the zebra and the mammoth. I'm going to have to feed them lots of food. Also, their babies will need extra attention. Okay, you have to care for a baby mammal. Okay, I'm going to have to give it more feeding, more warmth, protection. This is baby mammals need care from their parents. What about our friends, the reptiles? Okay. The treatment is they're very sensitive to temperature. So if I have a zoo and I have an alligator or a turtle, I'm going to have to bring them in when it's warm out. They're going to have warm cages or they're going to die. Reptiles don't require a lot of food because they don't need the energy to keep their blood warm. And also their babies don't need a lot of attention. You don't have to, once a baby alligator is born, it goes off by itself. So reptiles don't need a lot of attention. So again, simple observations can be used to determine the treatment. The treatment is usually obvious and it's going to make intuitive sense. Okay, so let's look at clusters of customers. Okay, price sensitivity. I might learn that once I know a segment, I can know if it is this customer is price sensitive. I might know if they are service sensitive. For example, young people right out of college once I know that you are a young person who's right out of college, I know that you are going to be price sensitive because you don't have a lot of money. If you are an adult and you are a doctor and you've been, you're 50 years old with a family and you're a doctor and your wife is a lawyer, you've got lots of money. You don't care about the price anymore. You just want good service. So I know that I take the older wealthy people, give them good service. The younger people, I give them low price but less service. Profitability and lifetime value. I can know if you are a profitable customer, then I'm going to work to keep you. If you are not profitable, but you have a high lifetime value, in other words, you have a potential for being a high profitable person, I might try to nurture you and make you profitable. But if you are profitable and you have a low lifetime value, I'm going to ignore you. I'm just going to say, well, you're very profitable, but you're not going to be profitable for long. I'm just going to take the money, and when you leave, you leave. I don't care. And also, if you're not profitable and you're never going to be profitable, I don't care. I'm going to just say, I might push you out the door. Default risk, I could say low risk people. I could say offer them more credit. If you're a high risk person, I can say, offer you overdraft protection. So I now know how to treat you once you are segmented. Useful. How can a cluster be useful? I can improve accuracy of standard analytics. I could do life event monitoring. I could do data novelty detection, classifying documents, profiling customers. There's lots of things I can do with a cluster once I have it. So I can identify fraud. There's things that I can do that corporations will do once they have a cluster or a segment. Now, the next lecture, which we will discuss after we talk about segmentation, will be complex clusters, and we'll look at that next.